Hello, I'm Cathie Long, and I'm going to introduce you to Esther Whitney, who's co-presenting with me today. So Esther, can you tell everybody what you look like?
So I am a white 34-year-old woman with blondie brown hair, mid-length, green eyes, and no glasses.
And where are you sitting?
So I'm sitting in my office/bedroom. It has grey walls with geometric patterns on.
What do you do?
So I'm a mother, an artist, and a student autism researcher.
Thank you. Okay, and now you're going to ask me the same questions, aren't
Yeah.
you?
Yeah. Cathie, can you tell us what you look like?
Okay, I'm a 57-year-old white woman. I have bluey green eyes and silver hair, which is cut in a bob. It's curly, and I have a short fringe.
Where are you sitting?
I am sitting in my office. I have a white background and some books on the shelves and a picture behind me.
Please, can you tell us a bit about what you do?
Okay, I'm a mother. I work as an independent social worker. I specialise in working with people who are neurodivergent, and I have an MA in autism. I'm also autistic with ADHD myself.
Brilliant, thank you.
Thank you, Esther. So today, Esther and I are going to talk about assessing autism in relation to social care and assessing a parent who is autistic and contact visits between parent and child, what needs to change. And we're also going to talk about autism not being the same as emotionally unstable personality disorder and what that means. So Esther has also had experience of going through the family court, and she's not going to talk about what happened, but she's going to talk about what she feels needs to change because of her experiences. So Esther, my first question is, what would you say are the most important things to remember when assessing a parent with autism or a parent who is autistic?
So from my experience, I would say that the assessor and parent needs to sit down and basically, how best can we work together? That question really does need to be asked. The assessor needs to give time for the parent to answer, and it might be an evolving process throughout the assessment. I think that the assessor does need to be mindful that just because they can work with a few adults with autism doesn't mean that you can use the same approach for every adult with autism. And then I think another thing that is really important is if the working relationship between assessor and parent has become difficult, don't just assume that it's the parent with autism's fault. Take a step back, discuss it with the parent, perhaps discuss it with other professionals that work closely with the parent, and then adjust your approach. Sometimes it does require thinking outside the box and a degree of creativity.
Thank you. Esther, I know that when you were going through child protection proceedings and with the family court, that there was a request by the court for a PAMs for parenting assessment. And I also know that this is something that courts regularly request when an assessment of an autistic mother needs to happen. So my question is, what was the PAMs for parenting assessment like for you, and how would you like to see it changed?
I think the PAMS parenting assessment has many pitfalls for parents with autism, and what I would like to see is preferably it not really being used for autistic parents, but if it is, I think it really does need to be tailored to the autistic parents' needs. The disadvantages that I found were that some of the questions were far too easy and far too obvious, and that was difficult to navigate because I felt that the assessor wanted a very complex answer. So that is quite an issue. The other thing that I found was that the cartoons were a sensory overload and far too stimulating, and that was very, very difficult to navigate. So what I would say is that the assessors really do need to be mindful of all the potential pitfalls that the PAMs 4 assessment has and tailor it accordingly.
Thank you. Esther, I know that when you were having contact visits with your daughter, there were some really big difficulties with that. Can you tell me more about that?
Yeah, so I found that children's services continually refused to make reasonable adjustments for my autism so that I could access contact. And I would say that there really does need to be a change in children's services, that they have a duty to make reasonable adjustments for parents with disabilities, including autism, so that they are able to access contact. I would say that contact should really be in an environment that is familiar and comfortable to the parent. Another key point is stop assessing parents with ASC as neurotypical parents. It's not fair, and we are not neurotypical, we are autistic, and therefore we approach parenting differently, and that's not wrong, that's different. I would also say as well that contact isn't real life, and just because a parent struggles in contact, in supervised contact, it doesn't mean that they can't parent. I think professionals need to always think, like, you know, how can this assessment be impacting autism, and how can we address that? The other thing that I came across is inaccurate contact recordings by contact supervisors. And what I would say is that in particular, when it's in a family court, I do think that contact should be video recorded. And this is for the protection of both parties, both parent and supervisor, so that if there are any discrepancies in the written contact records, there is you know, another account that can be looked over. I also think that video in contact could be used as a really good learning tool for parents, and social workers can potentially go over the video and ask, what could you have done better in this situation, or what could you have done differently? And that would be very beneficial, in particularly for parents with autism, because we are visual thinkers and we are visual learners.
Thank you. So the last topic we're covering is the issue of autism versus emotionally unstable personality disorder, EUPD. And one of the things I know as a professional is that many women that I've worked with have been misdiagnosed as having emotionally unstable personality disorder, and then it's subsequently transpired that they are autistic. So Esther and I are going to just talk a little bit about this, because it's something we're really both quite passionate about. So what's your views on this, Esther?
Yeah, so I mean, personally, I find the emotionally unstable personality disorder diagnosis rather quite difficult to get my head around, and it is quite unhelpful. A lot of professionals have rather quite negative views towards the diagnosis itself. I was diagnosed with autism, and then later on I was diagnosed with EUPD. And I found it really extremely negative experience. It did appear that professionals seemed to hone in on the EUPD and try and treat that, and I was put on so much mental health medication, which did not help at all. In fact, it made me far worse. Currently now, I'm on no mental health medication apart from melatonin at night time to help me sleep, and I'm in a far better place. So yeah.
Yeah, and I think as well that I mean, I know, Esther, that you went through dialectical behaviour therapy, which is the sort of prescribed treatment for emotional unstable personality disorder. Some people use that for autistic women as well as a treatment, but I think, you know, that was quite a long-term process, wasn't it? You know, it was quite a long treatment.
Yeah, it was, and I didn't particularly find it very helpful, in particular the group work. I found the one-to-one sessions far more helpful. But yeah, I think if dialectical behaviour therapy is going to be used for autistic patients, I do think it needs to be altered, really, and having autistic and EUPD patients both doing the group therapy at the same time is not helpful either. I mean, personally, I didn't find that helpful at all.
I mean, I actually find, you know, for me, I really take issue with the term personality disorder, you know, sort of saying that somebody's disordered and that they're less than, and it's just so negative. And then to put sort of people with different sort of neurological profiles really in a sort of in a treatment and deliver it all in the same way doesn't necessarily work, because being autistic, we very often, we just think differently. We sort of, you know, how we regulate our emotions can be very different. There's a whole lot of difference that is not taken into consideration. And I feel like dialectical behaviour therapy, whereas I'm not denying that it can help people, it's like people trying to fix us.
Yeah.
I think that's my issue with it.
Yeah, I definitely felt that as well. And I think, to be fair, after dialectical behaviour therapy, I developed my own coping strategies and my own understanding, which was actually far better than what was really being delivered, because I tailored it to my autism. I mean, I'm currently not diagnosed with EUPD because it was a misdiagnosis. And once that diagnosis was revoked, I mean, to be honest, it was the best thing that ever happened, because finally, like, the autism, you know, took center stage, and then professionals are able to, you know, work with me as an autistic adult, and instead of being bamboozled by the EUPD diagnosis.
Because I remember that even when you were diagnosed as being autistic, or as autistic, that there were still professionals, particularly social workers, I'm sorry to say, sort of saying, well, that's not right, you've got EUPD. And, you know, and that happens. And I think that's what happens to people, you know, when I'm working professionally, that if people have the autistic diagnosis and the EUPD's there, and it's really difficult to shed that. It's sort of like it's on the person's medical records, and very stigmatizing. So well, we were talking before this, Esther, about how, in a way, wouldn't it be so much better if mental health professionals, psychiatrists, psychologists had a really good understanding of the female presentation of autism, and they looked at developing some kind of screening or automatically thinking when they're considering EUPD, also considering whether or not the person they're working with is autistic, because that would probably save people a lot of wasted time and a lot of heartache.
Oh, I totally agree, Cathie. And I think if you get a service user who has a diagnosis of autism and EUPD, I think the question would be, actually, is there a misdiagnosis here? You know, I'm not saying that autistic people can't have EUPD, but there is, you know, and I can only speak from my own experience, there was a misdiagnosis there. And I think there needs to be more awareness. And I think that psychiatrists need to have a far deeper understanding of how autism presents in females. I think that there needs to be more in-depth training for mental health workers and social workers.
Yeah, I totally agree. So, okay, there's so much we could cover, but we've not got lots of time here. So I think we need to sort of say to everybody, thanks for watching. We will meet you for the live question and answer session on the day. And yeah, and thank you, Esther. It's been really good working with you. Thank you.
Oh, thank you very much, Cathie. Yeah, this is quite an in-depth topic, and this does not just do it justice. So we have got so much to say on this topic.
We could say loads. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Anyway.